course, fantastic. Can we have a big round of applause for the filmmakers? So this has been quite an achievement. I have to say that watching this in full, I've had the pleasure. My name is Ava Chin, by the way. Sorry about that. I was a friend of Corky's, and I'm the author of the forthcoming family memoir called Mott Street, about 4 generations of my family in New York's Chinatown. It is a pleasure to be here, Jennifer. I have seen the shorter cuts of this. When you had shown it when Corky was still alive, and he had the pleasure of getting to see it. I have to say that watching it again on the big screen, it's very difficult right now to talk because the work is so moving, and thank you for doing that work. So many words. Truly. Okay, so I do have questions. And so I think the first question, although, should we also introduce everybody one by one? We need to do that before we launch into the discussion. So shall we start just down there? Thank you.
I'm Linda Hattendorf, I'm the editor.
I'm sorry, I'm a mess. I am Lily Fan. Linda does this to me every time I watch this. This happens, and it's just been going on for too long. I'm Lily Fan, I'm the executive producer.
Thank you.
I'm George Sarose, along with my wife Hillary, your executive producers.
Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Takaki, I'm the director-producer.
And I'm Linda Lu Wu, and I'm the producer.
Thank you for all being here. What an achievement, Jennifer. You were working on this for close to 20 years, is that right?
Yeah.
All right, okay, so I have lots of questions for you. But the first question that I really wanted to know is, when did you first meet Corky or learn about Corky? And when did you realize that, my God, he needs to be the subject of a film? We Asian Americans were the subjects for him, but he actually deserves to be the subject. When did you realize that?
Well, so my background is in journalism, and in 2003, I was like, that was a time when the New York Times, you would still clip out articles, and I would file them. And I remember seeing an article about, this. I saw the title, Getting Asian Americans into the Picture, and I thought, what an interesting article. I actually thought it was a filmmaker, and I didn't really read it. I saw he was a photographer, and I clipped it away, put it, and filed it. And then within a year, I was at an AAJA, a friend of mine was speaking on a panel, and I was in the audience. And then after it was done, I turned around, and the first person that was there was Corky. But I didn't know him. I didn't know who he was, and I just said, "Where's the bathroom?" And Corky says, he's like, this building was, and I just said, I know where the men's bathroom is, but I don't know where the women's bathroom is. And I said, I guarantee you, if you tell me where the men's bathroom is, I'll find the women's. And he said, well, the building was built in blah, 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 and it was an all-boys school, and so it actually could be the men's is on one side, and I said, just tell me where the bathroom is. And he's like, I'll show you. And I'm like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Corky Lee. And he's like, I'm a photographer. But I didn't make the connection that he was the guy from the newspaper article until much later. We started talking. He said that he was doing a thing about Asian American mayors across the U.S. And I was like, my dad is kind of an Asian American mayor, and I said, I'm from Colorado. And so he actually did go photograph him later. But I said, why are you doing this? And he's like, I just think it's important, right? So I'm like, why would a person spend his good money doing all these different, he had a whole bunch of litany of things that he would photograph. So I knew immediately that this guy was really interesting. I never wanted to do a documentary, and I'll tell you, it took me about 9 years that's why possibly it took this long, because I didn't want to make the commitment. I just thought he was interesting, and I wanted to do a 5-minute piece. I wanted to put it on YouTube, and I just find people very fascinating, and I thought I would have all these different characters, but really, obviously, he sucked up all my time, so I never got past it.
Okay, so when you work on a project for a long time about a subject who was as rich, interesting, talkative, committed as Corky was to the Asian American community, when you work on a project for that long, I think that your views can change about the impact and the importance of the project, but you yourself change, right? Because who you were when you first started out as that younger person interested in doing, oh, he's really interesting, let me put this on like for 5 minutes on YouTube, to today, can you just talk to us about the trajectory of your connection to the project and your understanding of its importance?
I think one of the things that probably anyone who knows Corky knows is he's very singular vision kind of a guy. I think that in itself is very fascinating, that he just really, that was his soul, that was his passion, was committed to the, documenting the community. So right there, that's special. And I just think that I learned so much about the community through him, right? It kind of started out very casually. And I think so many people, I wasn't the only person that found him fascinating and then, learned from him. That was what's so lovely, is that he was so open to everyone. So if he would have many students throughout the years, and by those time, the students became adults, and he would just, people would say, oh, I heard about Corky Lee, and then they'd say, oh, I'm gonna go follow you, and he'd say, yeah, I'm going to this project, I'm doing this is happening in Chinatown, this is happening. And so I think I was one of many, 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 many people. But the thing that I think was so fascinating about Corky is he never changed. I think if you see some of the earlier footage, he was steadfast. He always said the same thing. He never wavered in his commitment and in his viewpoints. And I think that in itself also was really fascinating. You could interview him, and he had things that he would say, but they were not on the menu, for instance. He was very committed to that title, but he knew who he was very early on, and he knew what he wanted to do. So I don't think there's many people. He never changed. I changed because I learned, and so I wanted to document things that were important to him, and that's the things that ended up in the film. So he was a huge history buff. So
Yes.
that was part of the process for Linda. It's very hard to cut down what was in the film because of that.
Right. And I do want to ask Linda and folks who are here on the panel about your connection with the film, not just even what you did on the film, but the connection with working on a documentary, a subject as interesting and as committed to the community as Corky. So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, as you were just talking, Jen, I realized that the need for the film grew more and more over time. I certainly learned so much from Corky and from the communities that he documented, and sadly just saw the need for this knowledge being more and more important today in mainstream communities as well. So we hope that it gets out there.
Thank you. I just want to go down the line. So your connection with the film and Corky's relevance and great relevance.
I come to the film kind of in regret. Corky had asked me to help him and Jen with the film in 2017, and I never said yes. I didn't say no, and then the trauma of the pandemic happened, and it's important to me to help Jen finish the project and really tell the story of the person who's telling our story. Because if we don't do this now, and we don't put it out there, and we don't coin it in this moment, we're gonna lose it. And the community will have Corky's photos forever, but he really is our hero. There was only one Corky Lee. He's not replaceable. It's such a big loss for us, and it's my, I'm really grateful to be part of this.
Thank you. George?
I originally met Corky when I was a young man, back in the 80s, and he just had such a profound effect on me. I never met anybody like him before. He was true Pan-Asian, which I try to aspire to. He just opened me up, pulled me out of my Japanese American bubble, and I found much more empowerment as an Asian American, so that's how I identify myself now. I miss him tremendously, and I'm just so honored to be part of his team and to keep his legacy alive, and to we want to make this go mainstream, right? We want everybody to know his name, and that's the goal, and to make us as a community visible, even more than we can be. It's like it's so large, this film and his life, and he lives with all of us.
Thank you, George. Linda, can you talk to us? You knew Corky for a very long time.
You told me about, I met Corky in 1968. He was a student at Queens College. I was an editor of a bilingual newspaper in New York, Chinatown. He came to me to cover a story a project that he was having along with the 5th Precinct, helping youth of Chinatown get into sports. So him, and along with several colleges that had Chinese clubs, put together a soapbox derby race down Mott Street. I covered that story, and from that day on, our path has crossed back and forth, and plus in conjunction to a lot of projects for 54 years. So I knew him for all the good things and all the bad times that he had. I do also miss him.
Thank you. I think we all really miss Corky. So a couple more questions that I wanted to ask Jennifer and for anybody in the panel. I know that there were huge challenges in working on this project. There always are whenever you're working on a project for this length of time. So if you can talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced, just one or two, the top ones.
I think that the challenge with Corky is that he's so beloved and he means so much to so many that to tell his story isn't going to resonate with everyone because everyone has their own version. But I do think that was a commitment challenge for me. Like, that's why it took so long, because I would never think that I could be the person that would tell Corky's story. But at the same time, once I started filming him, I couldn't stop because I never felt the end of the story was there. So it kind of snowballed, and then about 9 years in, I said, okay, I'm going to commit it. I do have a commitment issue anyway, so I'm going to just commit 9 years. And I did an Indiegogo campaign, and then for the last 10 years, anyone who's known me, I've always said, oh, it's going to get done this year, or it's going to get done, a couple months. Like, Linda and I, really thought it was almost over. But we had to do so many, to tell the story properly, we wanted to make sure we had community input. So with that, we did a lot of community screenings, and that helped improve a lot of the films. So I think just the feedback took a really long time, and that was a challenge. Is like just making because Corky was so private. What was really interesting is that no one really knew Corky at all. Like, people would say they'd known him for over 40 years, but didn't really know him, right? They just saw him at a community event, and that was Corky, right? But I knew when I met him, I felt like he was underappreciated. Like, I felt like he needed to have a national platform where people would be aware of who he is. And unfortunately, he's not around, but that was kind of my initial idea, was to provide him a platform so that he could get his message out to a wider audience.
One of the other questions that I wanted to ask was there, this is just about the filmmaking process, was there anything in there that you had to cut out because of the length or whatever that you actually really wished had made it in? This is the outtakes question.
I would leave it to them because there was. Too much footage.
I think Linda and I, you would have.
Yeah.
I think for me, what stands out maybe is the FBI. We had a whole segment built in about how Corky was followed by the FBI and the CIA, and I went and I got like the information, and we had done like a short segment about that in one of the versions of the film. So I think that was a really interesting aspect, and the other part was just his family life. I mean, one of our versions we tested so many versions of his family life, and I think for the community, because they didn't know really the background of Corky, that was really interesting. So the balance of family and the politics and photography and the personal life was a really hard balance, and that's kind of what we were trying to figure out and achieve. So those are the things that stand out for me.
I think too, you're looking at 50 years of community activism, so it was really hard. You wanted to tell all these full stories, but we didn't have time to go in great depth, so we hope that the film will stimulate interest and you'll want to know more and go out there and Google what you want to know. And eventually we'll have a curriculum guide so it can get out there in an educational capacity as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is up next for the documentary? Like, where are you going with it? Do you know?
Do we know what we're going to? No, we don't know really yet, but we're very, we've had interest, so we're just trying to figure out what our next steps are. Fortunately, I have a very experienced team who I depend on for that, so yeah, we're very excited. We do know that our plan is to get it out large and wide, and we hope with this exposure that can be achieved.
Yeah, and I think that for anybody who's here in the audience, folks who knew Corky, folks who didn't necessarily know Corky directly, there was a whole crew of younger artists, photographers who were just inspired by Corky and the things that he was able to do in his lifetime. I think that the work that you've done on this film, one of the things is that it's helping to perpetuate Corky's legacy, and so I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, as a descendant of a railroad worker, all the stuff that Corky did, and all of the work that you did in creating, helping to perpetuate and continue this legacy. So I really want to thank you. If we can have a huge round of applause for the Where's Amy Chen? Okay, there is a movement afoot to co-name Moscow Street. Oh, sorry, no, yes. Pal, sorry.
It's Moscow.
It's Moscow.
No, it's not Dwyer Street. It's Moscow Street. To co-name Moscow Street Corky Lee Way. I believe there's information. Amy Chin, can you call it out?
There's a QR code that we have here. Alice and I also have paper petitions if you're old school like Corky was. But you can also go to bit.ly/Corky Lee Way and sign the petition, and we're going to get it
Can we go
done.
on their site?
Yes. Please go and find Amy in the back and help support this, because it's another way of keeping Corky alive in the neighborhood. Thank you,
Oh,
everybody.
wait, can I just say one thing? I would just like to thank everyone up here, for sure, from the bottom of my heart as well. But if there's anyone in the audience, like Doug, I know Brittany, like Maddie, like anyone in the audience who's part of this team, can you please stand up? Or the interviewees, there's so many people here that are involved with the film, the crew, the interviewees.